Well, my name's Glen Worrell, and I'm in my mid 50s now. And once upon a time, I understood that I had a problem, and that was that I'm gay and I come from a very conservative background. And so I was advised to undertake courses that included uh, weekends away, conferences uh, that um, were highly structured, and they had the sole aim of, uh, well, developing heterosexuality within me. And I moved to Tasmania and continued those highly structured courses, but then they were discredited. And that was when I sought help through prayer ministry. And that consisted of the major part of my experience in Tasmania. No, they didn't work. And there was great harm in that there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And there was a never ending confession of sin. And it was just something that would never end because I wasn't changed, and I was told that I would be changed. My life reached a crisis, and in that crisis, I realized I couldn't fight this battle against myself anymore. And so I understood uh, from a different perspective that this is how I'm made. And it was from that moment on that I embraced uh, who I am, and it radically altered my life. That's what radically altered my life, was self-acceptance. I was more or less expelled from the communities that I was part of. I lost friends, and certain family members certainly disapproved. And that was very fraught relations for quite some time. Some of them have never been repaired, and there's a devastation within that, particularly when you've been part of a faith community for a long time. The mental health impact before self acceptance was very negative. There was a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety, and there was also the guilt and shame as part of that cycle. And because there's an expectation that you'd be healed, there also comes a weight of responsibility that people expect you to be healed by a certain amount of prayer or by a certain time. And when that doesn't happen, then the fault is put back on myself. And that was part of the devastation as well. I do not want to see anyone else go through what I went through. Uh, and I understand that there's many people out there who are experiencing uh, the negative aspects of the conversion practices, but also there's the side of it that LGBT people don't need to be fixed. It's who they are. And it's just allowing people to be who they are. That is the most powerful experience that I've had, was finding out this is who I am and I could be my authentic self. I believe that they're trying to make a simple issue complex and difficult, and it's not. It's a matter of allowing people to be themselves and realizing that these practices, in whatever form they are harmful. That if you look at states where this legislation has been introduced, that religious freedom still exists and ministers can say what they want from the pulpit. It doesn't change that. But what it does look at is that ministers and lay people see themselves as therapists and they're unqualified. And that's where the harm comes in through those practices. So there is no adverse effect to religious freedom. That in my experience, I was never told that these practices don't work. So there was, how can there be consent when you're never told that there is another side to the story? And if I had known that these practices don't work, I would never have spent so long doing them. Is that you can't consent to somebody who is not a qualified therapist and who says that there's a problem when one doesn't exist. My experience was certainly that prayer-based conversion practices was one of the main features. And for me, there was a huge differentiation in power between those who pray and the people who are being prayed for, such as myself, which means that when you're prayed for, you feel quite helpless and frightened. And if things don't work out, that you find you still have this issue that you're gay, which you will, then mine led to an exorcism. And that was terrifying. And there was also, as I've mentioned previously, guilt and shame that was all part of that as well. So I would suggest that it's imperative for prayer ministry to be included in the legislation, that there is the danger that could become a large loophole and make the whole legislation redundant. That it was an utter waste of time and effort, that it was futile, and this whole idea of compulsory heterosexuality is just a nonsense. And so this legislation, my hope is that it will be introduced to protect the most vulnerable who are, coming to grips with their sexuality and discovering their authentic self.